For as long as I can remember, I've been the one who holds this family together. The responsible one, the forgotten one. It's a heavy role, invisible yet unbearably binding, like carrying a weight that nobody else seems to notice or appreciate. I juggle a demanding job as a nonprofit project manager, deadlines, meetings, crises, and then come home to a family that leans on me like I'm an endless well of patience and resources. Last Christmas was a sharp reminder of just how skewed the balance is. While everyone tore open their presents, my father pulled Daniel aside and handed him a check for $200,000, a down payment for a house. Me? I got his usual life advice, a hollow consolation after years of quietly footing bills no one else wanted to touch. Credit card balances, overdue medical copays, emergency expenses. I've been the family's invisible ATM. Patricia, my cousin, was hovering nearby, wearing that smirk like she owned the room, soaking in every ounce of attention, while I faded into the background. The sting of being overlooked was sharp, but beneath it all, I held a secret power, a flawless memory, and an uncanny ability to read between the lines when others couldn't. I keep it hidden, though, because exposing it would only stir more trouble. Something about that holiday cheer felt off, like a thin veneer stretched over a silent tension that I carry alone. I'm the one who gave everything and got nothing, while Patricia thrives on jealousy and control. It wasn't always like this. 15 years ago, at a family reunion, the roots of this dysfunction took hold. I can still see the moment clearly. Daniel had just graduated college, full of promise, and Dad introduced him with glowing pride, while I, newly employed and eager, was barely acknowledged. "You're the one who'll carry this family forward," Mom had said, looking at Daniel with that proud smile that always seemed reserved for him. When it was my turn, I was told to focus on settling down, as if my ambitions didn't matter. That day, I swallowed the sting and rationalized it as a temporary sacrifice for family harmony, because keeping the peace always felt more important than my own feelings. I remember covering Daniel's rent during a rough patch, stepping in when no one else would, while Patricia whispered behind my back about my lack of ambition. It was the moment the golden child and scapegoat dynamic cemented itself. Daniel, the favored son, Patricia, the loyal protector, and me, the silent worker bee. I buried my resentment deep, telling myself it was love that made me endure the emotional labor. But beneath the surface, the cracks were growing, and the soil was toxic with favoritism and jealousy. Over the years, I made sacrifices I never spoke about. I loaned Daniel $50,000 to stop him from losing his first apartment. I paid $15,000 toward Mom's overdue medical bills, and I quietly handled $10,000 in emergency family expenses that no one else wanted to touch. When Daniel's credit card debt hit $20,000, I covered it during tax season because I couldn't watch him drown. My husband, Mark, has been my silent anchor through it all. He watches me pore over our family ledger, the spreadsheets and journals where I meticulously track every dollar and every slight. He urges me to stand up for myself, though he knows how deeply these dynamics are ingrained. Patricia's disdain is subtle but constant. She scoffs at my overly cautious budgeting and whispers doubts about my ability to manage my own life, spinning the family's narrative against me. Despite it all, I clutch my secret power tight, proof of every sacrifice, every betrayal, though I haven't yet decided when or how to use it. The first public humiliation came at Daniel's birthday dinner. I tried to do something small, offer to pay for dessert, a gesture of goodwill, but Patricia saw an opening. Leaning close enough for half the table to hear, she hissed, "Careful, Bridget. Don't blow your budget trying to impress us." The room fell silent. Eyes darted awkwardly between us, some laughing nervously, others looking away. My cheeks burned with shame, but I forced a smile, saying quietly, "I'm happy to contribute." Mark squeezed my hand under the table, a quiet lifeline of support. The sting wasn't just in the words. It was the way the family laughed along or simply ignored the insult, as if I was always the punchline. Later, I told myself it was just Patricia's jealousy, a petty jab I had to shrug off. But inside, a seed of doubt and simmering resentment took root. That night, I realized that the subtle social sabotage wasn't accidental. It was a weapon Patricia wielded carefully to undermine me whenever I tried to step into the light, and I knew I couldn't keep fading away forever. The moment I tried to push back, the floodgates opened. Patricia's eyes gleamed with a predator's satisfaction when I hesitated, sensing my small act of defiance. Almost overnight, her campaign of quiet sabotage escalated into a full assault. Rumors began to trickle through the family grapevine, whispers that I was controlling the finances, that I played the victim to gain sympathy and manipulate decisions. These accusations weren't random. They were carefully tailored to isolate me, to paint me as the villain in a story I hadn't even wanted to be part of. Suddenly, family friends I'd known for years became distant, their smiles polite but hollow, their conversations turning cold the moment I entered the room. Flying monkeys, those distant relatives and old friends who always seemed to echo Patricia's venom, started showing up at gatherings, echoing her narrative with a chilling unanimity. At our last family holiday dinner, the atmosphere was thick with tension I could taste like ash. Patricia leaned in close, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're so perfect, but nobody wants your pity party." The words hit like a slap, sharp and unexpected. I opened my mouth, wanting to defend myself, to explain the countless sacrifices I'd made quietly, but the faces around me froze, some with thinly veiled smirks, others with blank indifference. I faltered, shrinking back into my chair, feeling the weight of their silent judgment press down like a physical force. Patricia's smile widened, triumphant. The gaslighting was relentless. She twisted my efforts into arrogance, my sacrifices into self-promotion. I began to doubt everything. Was I really overstepping? Was I just imagining the cold shoulders and whispered criticisms? The isolation wrapped around me like a suffocating fog. Standing up felt less like courage and more like folly, but the urge to keep fighting flickered stubbornly beneath the doubt. Determined not to let this tearing of my family spiral into permanent destruction, I sought a peaceful resolution. I asked Aunt Janet, the only family member I thought might mediate fairly, to bring us together. We gathered in the dimly lit living room, the air heavy with unspoken grievances and the weight of years. I laid out the facts calmly: my financial support, the emotional labor, the quiet sacrifices no one else seemed to notice. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I passed around the spreadsheets I kept like sacred texts. Patricia responded with practiced venom, accusing me of sowing discord and being overly sensitive, her words sharp as knives. Susan, our mother, sat silently, nodding politely but refusing to step in or condemn Patricia's attacks. Janet tried to hold a neutral stance, but beneath her calm exterior, I sensed her bias. She dismissed my concerns as family politics, as if my pain and proof were trivial gossip. The meeting ended with no resolution, just more bitterness simmering beneath forced smiles. I left feeling crushed, my honesty distorted and weaponized against me. The truth, it seemed, was irrelevant in a family where loyalty was a currency and bias ran deeper than facts. I had hoped for understanding, for fairness, but I walked away with nothing but a hollow ache and the grim realization that maturity and reason wouldn't break their chains of favoritism. It was a hard lesson. Sometimes even the clearest truths get twisted into lies when the stakes are family pride and power. The next blow came unexpectedly, but with brutal force. At a mutual friend's wedding, a place where I had hoped to blend in and find some reprieve, Patricia orchestrated a scene that left me reeling. During the toasts, she stood and, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she mocked me publicly. "Let's raise a glass to Bridget," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm, "and her modest accomplishments, always trying, but somehow falling short." The room tensed. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some forcing polite chuckles while others stared, unsure whether to intervene. What stung most was Daniel's open endorsement of her words. He laughed openly, his approval a fresh wound. The humiliation wasn't just social. I knew some attendees worked in nonprofit circles, my professional world, where reputation mattered. I felt exposed and vulnerable in a way I hadn't before. Mark confronted Patricia afterward, his voice low but firm, demanding an explanation. She smiled sweetly, denying everything with practiced innocence. The cruelty was deliberate, the loyalty between Patricia and Daniel a wall I couldn't breach. The damage was tangible. My confidence shattered in splinters, my social standing diminished in a room full of people who once respected me. Yet beneath that hurt, a simmering fury grew. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about survival, about reclaiming the dignity I'd been denied for too long. In a last, desperate attempt to heal the rift, I poured my heart out in a letter to my parents. Every word weighed with years of sacrifice and quiet suffering. I wrote of my financial support, the emotional toll, and the deep pain of favoritism that fractured us. I asked for fairness, for shared responsibility, and for respect. When I visited them, I read the letter aloud in the living room, my voice trembling but resolute, laying bare the raw wound I carried. But before I could finish, Patricia interrupted with a sneer, dismissing my words as drama, while Mom's gaze hardened. "You're making mountains out of molehills," she said coldly, the words cutting deeper than any insult. The letter, my vulnerability, became a weapon against me, proof that I was the troublemaker, the oversensitive one. The divide deepened, and I felt the line drawn in the sand. My pain was no longer a call for help, but a justification for exclusion. I realized then that the family I loved might never change, and that my sacrifices could no longer come at the cost of my own self-respect. I tried to hold on to hope, but everything I did seemed to crumble beneath me like fragile glass shattering on a cold tile floor. My parents, once the pillars I leaned on, began shutting me out of family decisions. Invitations to gatherings became fewer, my opinions dismissed without a second thought. Daniel, my own brother, grew colder, refusing even to acknowledge the debts I had quietly covered for years. His silence was louder than any argument. The flying monkeys, those distant relatives who danced to Patricia's tune, circulated their venom with feverish delight, whispering behind my back and turning old family friends into strangers. Even the few who once seemed neutral stepped away, adopting Patricia's narrative like gospel. I was isolated, a ghost in the very family I had kept together for so long. At night, I sat in the dim glow of our living room, clutching Mark's hand, feeling the weight of utter loneliness pressing against my chest. I wondered if I had imagined it all, the endless sacrifices, the sleepless nights worrying over medical bills, the money I sent discreetly to keep this family afloat. Was I really the villain, the overbearing do-gooder, or just a crazy woman fighting a losing battle? Every tear felt like a confession of failure. I questioned my worth. I doubted if I deserved better, or if I was forever doomed to be the family's unpaid servant, the invisible ATM. The emotional labor I poured out had yielded nothing but coldness and betrayal. Mark's silent presence was the only balm in this storm, but even his comfort couldn't fill the growing void. I toyed with the thought of walking away completely, abandoning this fractured family to their own devices. But guilt clutched my heart like iron chains. How could I leave them in the mess, knowing the fragile threads I held might unravel entirely? Was my duty merely a curse or a lifeline? The suffocating conflict twisted inside me, a storm of despair and love, exhaustion and stubborn hope. I felt broken, utterly defeated. But beneath the rubble, a faint ember flickered, fragile, yet stubborn. I didn't know it then, but this dark night of the soul was the prelude to something I couldn't yet name. Christmas came, wrapped in the coldest silence I had ever known. The house was filled with forced cheer and hollow laughter, like a stage play where everyone forgot their lines. I watched from the edges as my father pulled Daniel aside, pressing a thick envelope into his hands. I could see the weight of it, $200,000 in cash for a down payment on a house. The extravagant gift, the kind of thing I had dreamed about in quiet moments, was handed to my brother like a birthright. When it came time for me, I received nothing but a lecture on being practical, the same tired advice I'd heard for years. The room buzzed with fake smiles, polite claps, and the hollow sound of my heart cracking into pieces nobody noticed. Later, Patricia raised her glass, her voice loud and sharp as a blade. "Here's to Daniel's brilliant future," she toasted, her eyes blazing with triumph as they locked onto me. The room's attention shifted instantly. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the silent judgment wrapping around me like a noose. My lips pressed tight, but tears pricked the corners of my eyes. No one said a word, but everyone saw. The humiliation was crushing. Years of invisible suffering distilled into that single moment. The air hung heavy with betrayal, and in that instant, something inside me shattered. The quiet victim, the invisible ATM, the doormat. I was done being all of those things. The pain that had kept me silent now sparked a cold clarity. I was no longer just hurting. I was awakening. I held in my hands years of proof, of sacrifices and betrayals, and I knew this was my point of no return. After the guests left and the house grew quiet, I found myself alone with my journals and spreadsheets, the meticulous records of every dollar lent, every bill paid, every slight endured. I flipped through pages stained with tears and frustration, reliving the endless parade of disappointments. Anger started to bloom inside me, red and fierce, rising from the deep ache of betrayal. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was a fire fueled by years of neglect and manipulation. I saw clearly how my silence had allowed Patricia's control to grow unchecked, how my kindness had been weaponized against me. The family's toxic patterns weren't going to change on their own, and if I stayed quiet, I was complicit in my own erasure. For the first time, I acknowledged my own worth beyond the roles I'd been forced to play: the caretaker, the financial crutch, the scapegoat. I whispered to myself, never again will I be invisible. Never again will I let them take without consequences. The words felt like armor around my bruised heart. Mark listened quietly as I shared this newfound resolve, his steady presence grounding me. The exhaustion that had weighed me down for so long began to lift, replaced by a fierce determination. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was becoming a force. The years of pain had ignited a spark that could no longer be extinguished. With Mark by my side, I began to lay out a plan, one born not from vengeance but from the need for truth and justice. We talked late into the night, strategizing how to unravel the web Patricia had spun around our family. We don't confront her head-on, I said firmly. That would only make her dig in deeper. Instead, we expose the lies she's told quietly, through those who trust her, facts they can't ignore. Mark nodded, offering to work behind the scenes, gathering information and building alliances among the relatives who had been swayed by Patricia's manipulations. I took the first step, sending subtle, carefully worded messages to distant cousins and family friends, small, factual reminders of Patricia's past deceptions and the true cost of favoritism. It was like planting seeds of doubt in fertile ground. Each message was a calculated move, designed to chip away at the false narrative that had isolated me for so long. The shift from raw emotional pain to deliberate strategic action gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. My secret power, the detailed knowledge of every sacrifice, every slight, was no longer buried. It was my weapon, my shield, and my path forward. As the pieces began to move, I felt a cautious hope stir. This was just the beginning. I sat at the kitchen table late one evening, a notebook open before me, my laptop humming quietly as I sifted through years of family dynamics with a sharpened eye. Mapping their dependencies wasn't just an abstract exercise anymore. It was necessary, like charting the weak points before a storm. Patricia's reliance was clearer than I'd imagined. Janet, her mother, was her unwitting anchor, providing social cover and connections that kept Patricia's smokescreens afloat. Janet's discomfort with Patricia's behavior, though subtle, showed in fleeting glances and awkward silences during family dinners. I hadn't noticed those fissures until now, but they were real. Daniel, my brother, was another pillar supporting Patricia's throne, his blind loyalty and financial privileges baffling to anyone else. And Susan, our mother, with her quiet nods and avoidance, sealed the pact of favoritism that kept me invisible. I made discreet calls to a trusted attorney, explaining my concerns without revealing too much. The lawyer's calm voice assured me that documenting every financial transaction, every loan, and the emotional manipulations could form a foundation for real leverage. It was both relieving and terrifying to hear. This wasn't just about feelings now. It was about facts and proof. I had stacks of receipts, text messages, and even overheard conversations from family gatherings. Once dismissed as gossip, these snippets now felt like treasure troves. At one barbecue, I recalled Patricia's sharp whisper about me, twisting my generosity into self-serving schemes. Those words, recorded in my notes, were ammunition. Compiling this evidence made me feel less fragile, more in control. Patricia's power, once a looming shadow, looked more like a fragile castle built on shifting sand. For the first time, I saw a way through, a path to take down the facade and reclaim my dignity. Despite the turmoil, I kept my voice steady when I called Janet the next day. Our conversation was cautious, layered with half-truths and probing questions. I hinted at concerns without laying out all my cards, watching for her reaction. Janet's tone was hesitant, but beneath the surface, I sensed a crack in her loyalty. It was a small victory, but a crucial one. I knew from experience that alliances in our family were fragile. One shift could topple the entire balance. I started reaching out to distant cousins and family friends, the ones who'd drifted away or stayed on the sidelines. I framed my words carefully, offering subtle truths that might awaken doubt without sparking immediate backlash. While maintaining the facade of normalcy in family gatherings, I worked behind the scenes, gathering information and allies. The weight of what I was about to do pressed on me, but it was tempered by a growing sense of purpose. I wasn't just the victim anymore. I was becoming the architect of change. Every interaction felt like walking a tightrope. At the last Sunday dinner, I smiled and nodded through Patricia's barbed jokes, concealing the storm that brewed beneath. The scent of roasted turkey and parsley filled the room, mingling with the stale tension I could taste on everyone's breath. Underneath the polite chatter, I was cataloging vulnerabilities, noting who looked away when Patricia spoke, who hesitated before agreeing with her. The family's web of favoritism and deceit was intricate, but not impenetrable. I was no longer drowning in the silence. I was preparing to speak, to reveal, to reclaim control. The inventory of weaknesses wasn't just a list. It was a map for my next moves, and the navigator was finally ready. Maintaining the calm surface I'd always perfected, I slipped into my role seamlessly during family events, masking the fire that burned beneath. Behind closed doors, I fortified my defenses. Passwords changed, financial documents secured, and correspondence meticulously archived. Every email from Patricia's manipulative texts, every bank statement showing unacknowledged loans were stored like precious artifacts. I crafted narratives quietly, stories grounded in concrete evidence, ready to be unveiled in measured doses. Public confrontation would only play into Patricia's hands. My revelations had to be surgical, precise, impossible to deny. I reached out to Janet again, careful this time to keep the conversation light, testing her boundaries without risking exposure. "I've been thinking a lot about family dynamics," I said casually one afternoon over the phone. "Sometimes it's hard to see the full picture." Janet's responses were clipped but thoughtful, a guarded openness that gave me hope. I planted seeds of doubt, watching her carefully for signs that she might be ready to reconsider her loyalties. Meanwhile, I began quietly contacting family friends and distant cousins, sowing discreet hints about the truth behind Patricia's polished facade. I shared carefully selected stories, emphasizing facts over feelings, ensuring that when the moment came, my revelations would land on fertile ground. In public, I kept my usual role, the patient, dependable sister and daughter. I laughed at Patricia's jokes, nodded politely at Susan's cold dismissals, and smiled at Daniel's smug remarks. No one suspected the storm brewing beneath my composed exterior. I was a master of disguise now, hiding my resolve behind years of practiced patience. The tension was tangible. I could feel it in the tightness of my chest and the careful avoidance of certain topics. Each family dinner, each holiday gathering became a battleground where I played the long game, gathering strength and allies without revealing my hand. Mark was my steady anchor through it all. He helped me organize my records, coached me on the timing of disclosures, and reminded me to breathe when the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm. His quiet support was a balm, But I knew the real battle was mine to fight. Every step of preparation was exhausting, but necessary. I was no longer helpless. I was ready. The fragile alliances within our family were shifting beneath my feet, and I was about to tip the scales. The plan was taking shape, and the moment of revelation was drawing near. The air was thick with anticipation, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope piercing the darkness. After a particularly strained family dinner, as the last guests trickled out and the house settled into uneasy quiet, Janet pulled me aside. Her voice was low, trembling slightly with the weight of confession. "Bridget, I can't keep pretending anymore," she said, eyes darting nervously. "I've known things about Patricia." I held my breath as she pulled out her phone, scrolling to reveal messages that stunned me. Texts and emails where Patricia disparaged family members with cruel precision, admitting to fabrications designed to isolate me. The venom in those words was chilling, but the most shocking part was Janet's admission that she had grown disillusioned, her loyalty fractured by Patricia's relentless cruelty. Janet's eyes were glassy when she confessed, "I've been her shield for too long. I realize now she's tearing this family apart, and I don't want to be part of it." Her voice cracked with guilt and relief, a mix of betrayal and hope. She warned me to act swiftly before Patricia noticed the shift. This revelation was a lifeline, an unexpected twist that altered everything. With Janet's insider knowledge and her willingness to switch sides, I suddenly wielded a powerful new ally. The fragile balance of power within the family was about to tip dramatically. I felt a surge of adrenaline and cautious optimism. After years of isolation, betrayal, and silent suffering, the tide was turning. Janet handed me the digital proof, and I carefully backed it up, knowing this was the key to dismantling Patricia's carefully constructed image. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me, but the clarity was invigorating. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice, about reclaiming the narrative stolen from me. The urgency to move forward burned in my chest, fierce and unstoppable. That night, as I lay awake, the house around me silent except for Mark's steady breathing, I planned my next moves with renewed determination. With Janet's support, the invisible walls Patricia had built were cracking. The alliances that had once seemed impenetrable were vulnerable. I felt a fierce sense of purpose, knowing the battle ahead would be difficult, but that I was no longer alone. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. The first moves were subtle but deliberate. I began quietly withdrawing the financial support I'd long provided. A shift so slight it was almost imperceptible, but enough to unsettle the carefully maintained status quo. Patricia noticed immediately, the slight tightening of the purse strings, the sudden coldness in my responses, but she couldn't pinpoint the cause. I shared Janet's evidence with a select few family members, presenting facts with a calm, measured tone that left no room for denial. Whispers began circulating, quiet doubts planted like seeds of mistrust. Patricia's carefully curated image started to crack. I blocked her access to shared family funds and the group chat notifications that coordinated family events. The exclusion was subtle, a small but potent cut to her influence. Patricia's reaction was predictable. She intensified her efforts to control the narrative, ramping up the gaslighting and social sabotage. But the cracks were visible now. Some family allies began to hesitate, their allegiance wavering as Patricia's credibility weakened. The energy in family gatherings shifted. The once unshakable support for Patricia had begun to fracture. The consequences hit first in whispers and side glances, then in open questions and quiet withdrawals of support. Patricia's attempts to rally her base only exposed her insecurities more. She was fighting blind, unsure where the blows were coming from. Meanwhile, I maintained my calm exterior, careful not to let my satisfaction show. Mark watched with quiet pride as I navigated this treacherous terrain, his steady presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. The balance of power was shifting, and though no one yet connected all the dots, the family was feeling the tremors. Patricia's reign, once unchallenged, was beginning to unravel. The first phase of my plan was underway, and the fallout had only just begun. The holiday gathering was suffused with the familiar scents of cinnamon and pine. the low hum of polite laughter and clinking glasses filling the house that had witnessed so many of our family's strained reunions. But beneath the surface, the air was thick with tension I could almost taste, a charged silence waiting to snap. I stood in the center of the room, clutching the folder I had prepared for months. Inside were the records, the receipts, the carefully documented evidence, proof of everything I had carried alone, the sacrifices no one had acknowledged. Janet stood nearby, her eyes flickering with a mixture of guilt and resolve. While Susan's usual icy expression faltered for a moment, Daniel shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. I cleared my throat, forcing calm into my voice. "It's time we face the truth," I said, my words slicing through the murmur like a blade. I laid the folder on the dining table and began to spread out the evidence. Bank statements showing the thousands I had loaned to Daniel for his house, text messages where Patricia twisted facts to isolate me, and Janet's own admissions, texts and emails she had reluctantly shared, revealing the web of lies Patricia spun to maintain her control. The room grew silent, eyes darting between me and the damning documents. "I'm no longer your scapegoat or ATM," I declared, voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "The family deserves the truth, and so do I." The color drained from Patricia's face, her usual smirk replaced by stunned silence. I saw the shift. The power dynamic reversed as murmurs swelled into whispers of regret from those who had once doubted me. Susan's gaze hardened, but did not interrupt. Daniel looked pained, as if the realization was fracturing the foundation of his loyalty. I didn't need to raise my voice. The weight of the truth was enough. With measured clarity, I laid out new boundaries. No more financial bailouts, no more emotional manipulation. I asserted my place not as a servant to their needs, but as an equal, deserving of respect. In that moment, surrounded by family witnesses, I reclaimed what had been stolen: my dignity, my voice, my power. The air seemed to shift, the festive warmth cooling into something sharper, clearer. It was my champagne moment, the triumphant breaking of silence, and I held my head high as the room absorbed the reality I had finally forced them to see. Patricia's world began to crumble almost immediately. The veneer of control she had clung to shattered in the wake of the revelations I had laid bare. Desperate, she launched into frantic calls, her voice dripping with false apologies and manufactured warmth aimed at regaining favor. But the family was no longer hers to command. Janet stood firmly by my side, reinforcing the boundaries we had set, her own loyalty having shifted in a quiet but irreversible way. Patricia's attempts to charm and manipulate felt transparent, hollow echoes that bounced off a wall that no longer gave way. Daniel, shaken by the truth and Patricia's unraveling, started to distance himself, his previously unwavering allegiance now fractured. The family's fractures, once hidden beneath layers of denial, began to show in stark relief. Whispered conversations turned into honest dialogues, and the loyalty that had once isolated me now gathered around my quiet strength. Patricia's social standing plummeted, her isolation growing like a shadow that lengthened with each failed attempt to regain control. I watched it all unfold with a calm resolve, refusing to be dragged into the chaos she tried to create. Mark was my anchor, reminding me to stay steady amidst the storm. The family began to heal, the trust shifting toward me, a slow but palpable restoration that felt both fragile and profound. The consequences of Patricia's manipulations were undeniable: lost alliances, damaged reputations, and the crushing loneliness she had built for herself. It was a reckoning, and I felt the heavy but cleansing weight of justice settling in the air. Patricia's final attempts to regain control were desperate and bitter. She unleashed her flying monkeys, family members she'd manipulated into spreading rumors and falsehoods to sully my reputation professionally and socially. I received tense messages, whispered threats, and saw how she pushed Susan, our mother, to intervene on her behalf, playing the emotional guilt card. But I was ready. Mark and I had prepared for this, with legal warnings in place and a dossier of evidence that nullified every claim she made. Each attempt at provocation was met with a calm, unshakable refusal to engage. Her aggression only deepened her isolation. Family members who once hesitated now recognized the pattern. Her manipulations and deceit laid bare like scars in the daylight. They rallied around me, their eyes open to the truth I had fought so long to reveal. Patricia's final gambits collapsed under the weight of their own transparency, leaving her alone in a family that was no longer hers to command. The cost of her envy and selfishness was clear: social exile, fractured relationships, and a legacy of distrust. I felt no triumph in her downfall, only relief that the toxic cycle was breaking. Months passed. The weight I had carried for so long lifted, replaced by a peace I hadn't known in years. Mark and I grew closer, our relationship fortified by shared battles and quiet victories. The boundaries I had fought to establish held firm. No longer was I the family's ATM or emotional dumping ground. Janet's alliance created a fragile but genuine path toward healing, a tentative truce where honesty was the foundation. Patricia remained estranged, a shadow on the periphery of family life, a cautionary figure defined by jealousy and isolation. I walked through my newly built home, its walls echoing with the laughter of a future I was building on my own terms. The 4,200 square feet of space felt like freedom, an emblem of resilience and independence that no one could take away. When my father asked for a tour, I smiled quietly and said, "Advice is nice, but I built this myself." It was not a boast, but a testament to the strength I had found in claiming my voice and my life. The road had been painful, marked by betrayal and silence, but it led here, toward hope, dignity, and the promise of healthier, more honest family ties. I was no longer invisible. I was whole.